And then Simon Kenton and Simon Girty rejoin. So Simon Kenton returns to Pittsburgh 4 years later. Joyous reunion between Girty and Kenton. Simon Kenton and Girty go on a hunt together the next day, but they didn't do any hunting. They became blood brothers. The two Simons walked through the woods, rambling on and catching up on the past 4 years. It was quickly made apparent that this would be the last time together, as Simon Girty explained that it so happened that the next day he was planning on defecting to the British at Fort Detroit. Detroit, Eminem, rap god. Simon Kenton was momentarily speechless, so that his beloved friend of Pennsylvanian by birth could turn his back on his fellow Americans was unbelievable, nor could Simon's pleas change his mind. Simon Girty's reason was not the Pledge of Allegiance to King George, the same pledge that both Simon Kenton and Daniel Boone taken many times before '76, as it was his disgust at the way Americans were treating the Indians. Simon Girty believed that the American Revolution, the wars of French and Indian, the French-British and Indian War, and the War of 1812 were all just concoction, just white civil war in order to steal Amerindian lands. Simon Girty's life at Fort Pitt had been made miserable because of his admiration for and dealings with the red man. Any kind of promotion or advancement had been denied to Simon Girty. So he had it. He was done. From 1779 to 1771, Simon Girty stayed active with the Shawnee in the Ohio country and fought in many altercations, a few of which were Shawnees' siege of Bryan Station, Kentucky in 1782, Shawnee and Miami victory against General Josiah Marr's invading army sent by President George Conotokarius, Washington, to wipe the tribes out of western Ohio in 1790. The sound defeat of General Arthur St. Clair's invading army, again sent to wipe out the tribes of western Ohio in 1791. The Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794, which is the last stand of the Shawnee, Miami, Delaware, and other tribes of the Ohio country, when the aforementioned tribes were marched against by General Mad Anthony Wayne to exterminate them, and eventually decided their future in the Ohio country. William Crawford, this was the same man that wiped out the Mingo village right after the Camp Charlotte, the peace treaty at Camp Charlotte, which Simon Girty had signed. So Cornstalk had signed the peace treaty at Camp Charlotte right after the Battle of Point Pleasant and Dunmore's War. And William Crawford was the one that wiped out the Mingo village after Johnny Logan went and signed. So, you know, they wipe out 8 Mingo towns at Dunmore's War. Dunmore's War wiped out 8 Mingo villages. And William Crawford was one of those generals who did it. So William Crawford, there's an important story with Simon Girty's biography with William Crawford. William Crawford eventually leads this expedition, and he runs into Simon Girty. So William Crawford was a surveyor who worked as a western land agent for George Conotokarius, Washington, and so that George Conotokarius, Washington, never had to step foot into Kentucky because he had William Crawford. William Crawford fought in the French, British, and Indian War and American Revolution in 1782. General William Irvine persuaded William Crawford to come out of retirement and lead an expedition against enemy Amerindian villages along the Sandusky River. Before leaving on May 16th, he made out his will and testament. William Crawford did. His son, John Crawford, his son-in-law, William Harrison, and his nephew and namesake, William Crawford, also joined the expedition. After his election as commander of the expedition, William Crawford led about 500 volunteers deep into the American Indian Territory with the hope of surprising them. However, the Amerindians and British allies at Detroit, Eminem, Detroit rap god, had learned about the expedition in advance and brought about 440 men to the Sandusky River to oppose William Crawford. So the Amerindians knew what was going on, brought 440 Native Americans ready to stop his force of 500. So they're actually outnumbered. They went to oppose William Crawford. William Crawford's a Shawnee baby killer, his squaw campaign. After a day of indecisive fighting, William Crawford found themselves surrounded. During a confused retreat, William Crawford and dozens of his men were captured. The Amerindians executed many of them in retaliation for the Hanadaguyus massacre. And the Hanadaguyus massacre, earlier in the year, was where 100 peaceful Christian Amerindian men, women, and children had been murdered by Pennsylvania militiamen. So again, just like Jacob and Daniel Greathouse, who wiped out Johnny Logan's mother, father, brother, and sister, you also have the Hanadaguyus massacre. So William Crawford is also murdering men, women, and children. So because of the Hanadaguyus massacre, that's why you have Crawford. Let's see. That's why they was especially brutal to William Crawford. So William Crawford's execution was brutal. William Crawford was tortured for at least 2 hours before he was burned at the stake. So William Crawford's burned at the stake. William Crawford pleaded with Simon Girty to just shoot him so he didn't have to endure the torture, but instead Simon Girty just laughed. William Crawford's nephew and son-in-law were also captured and executed. Simon Girty set up his own small trading post in town at present-day St. Mary's, Ohio, and he lived there until Girty and the Native Amerindians were defeated at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794 alongside Blue Jacket and Little Turtle. St. Mary's has gone by a variety of names, the first of which was the name of a Native American village on the same location, Kettletown. St. Mary's is a city in Auglaize County, Ohio, United States. The population was 8,332. That's the 2010 census. It's included in the Wapakoneta, Ohio Micropolitan Statistical Area. St. Mary's was formerly known as Fort Barbie and Girty's Town. So St. Mary's was named Girty's Town, so that was his town. St. Mary's was the county seat of Mercer County from 1824 until 1840, when the seat was moved to Salina after Auglaize County was organized in 1848. St. Mary's competed with Wapakoneta for the position as county seat, but was ultimately unsuccessful in the controversial countywide election. After the Shawnee defeat at Fallen Timber, Simon Girty went to Canada, settled on a farm just below Malden on the Detroit River. Simon Girty there married, raised a family. He died on his farm in 1818, having aged over 70 years. So Simon Girty, white man, deflects to the engines, right, becomes engine, turns engine, that's what they said. Because he laughed at William Crawford's cries for help, he became ingrained in the Western theater in the American Revolution as a demon figure, someone to say, he's a bastard, you know, that he's such a piece of shit, Simon Girty. And the reason why they hated him was because they knew that his very existence and what he was fighting for mocked their, you know, self-righteous, not really self-righteous claims, but they think it's self-righteous. So the Mohawk Mingo war chief Plucky, aka Tecanyaterighto, Plucky-me-no-tea, he was fighting alongside the Mingo war chief Johnny Logan, Talgahyeetah, after the Yellow Creek massacre up to the Battle of Point Pleasant and perhaps beyond. So Plucky and Johnny Logan were buddies. The Mingo people are a band of Iroquois who broke off from the Iroquois. So the Mingo weren't Iroquois, they were ex-Iroquois. They made up of peoples who migrated west into the Ohio country in the mid-18th century. Anglo-Americans called these migrants Mingos, which is a corruption of Mingwe, an Eastern Algonquin name for Iroquois language groups in general. Mingos have also been called the Ohio Iroquois and the Ohio Seneca. Most were forced to move to Kansas and later Indian Territory, Oklahoma, under Indian removal programs. You know, when the $20 bill man, fucking Andrew Jackson, right, Trail of Tears and shit, Supreme Court says it's illegal to wipe people off their lands. So Andrew Jackson says, fuck you, Supreme Court, I'm gonna wipe them out anyways, and nobody does shit about it. Nobody stands up to this fucking Hitler-esque massacring fucking piece of shit. So that was the Indian removal programs. You know, they had to force the rest of the Mingos to Oklahoma and Kansas. Their descendants reorganized as a tribe recognized in 1937 by the federal government as the Seneca-Cayuga tribe of Oklahoma. So Seneca, Cayuga tribe, those are two tribes of the Iroquois, but it doesn't mention the Mohawks, and it doesn't say anything about Mingo. But I guess you can include them with the Seneca and the Cayuga since they are all Iroquois, same language group, right? During Lord Dunmore's, I hate saying Dunmore's, Lord Dunmore's war, Chief Plucky was one of the most active chieftains allied to the Shawnee, conducted extensive raids against settlements, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and Virginia, from his base at Pluckystown, which is 18 miles north of present-day Columbus, Ohio, in central Ohio. So he's a sub-chieftain for the Shawnees, so he's with Chief Blackfish, and he's with Cornstalk. They know what Chief Plucky is doing, what Plucky's up to, but Plucky's kind of a renegade. Plucky's going rogue. Plucky does what he wants to do. And so, in spite of the peace, the so-called peace after the Treaty of Camp Charlotte, it's bullshit peace because they, attacked Mingos right after that, right after signing the treaty. William Crawford attacked the Mingos right after the treaty, right? So breaking the treaty immediately. So Plucky, he wasn't going to accept it. He was going to remain a fierce and particularly hostile enemy, especially after he found his blood relations lying dead by Virginian colonists. So Virginian colonists had killed Pluggy's family, whereas Pennsylvania colonists had killed Johnny Logan's, that being one of the major differences. So in the Western theater of the American Revolutionary War, the Mingo War Chief Plucky commanded a series of raids against American settlements throughout Ohio and Kentucky before his death at McClellan Station in 1776. On June 16, 1774, 2 years before Plucky's raid into Kentucky, also the same year that the Yellow Creek Massacre happened, Harrodstown, sometimes called Herod's Fort, was laid out and founded by its namesake, James Herod, June 16, 1774. First white settlement in the West, Kentucky was the first spot for Manifest Destiny. This was where the Western expansion began. When they passed the Appalachian Mountains, they went into Kentucky. So, Chief Plucky and his band of Mingo Indian warriors followed George Rogers Clark's trail, and they attacked Harrodstown, the first settlement in Kentucky, 2 years before it was established on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1776. Later on, they would kill 2 people on George Rogers Clark's trail. So they attacked Harrodstown Christmas Day, December 25th at noon. Attacked Harrodstown, the first settlement the first white settlement of the West, and that was noon Christmas Day. They attacked the people at Licking River, and then that night is when George Conotokarius Washington would cross the Delaware River, defeat the Hessian forces in Trenton, New Jersey, when an Amerindian woman was leading the helm. You don't see that picture. You see Washington crossing the Delaware River, but you don't see the Amerindian woman that was leading his way, that was being used as a scout. So she was there. Chief Plucky was formerly a Mohawk. He organized Mingo, Mohawk, Delaware, Shawnee, Iroquois, Chippewas, Wyandots, and Ottawas together at Pluckystown at present-day Delaware, Ohio. A paper written by Emmett M. Wickham tells the history of the Mingo Indian tribe in Delaware, their chief Plucky, and his village Pluckystown, which was located at the east end of Lincoln Avenue near the entrance of the current Mingo Park. While the city and county of Delaware are named for the Delaware tribe, the city of Delaware itself was founded on top of a Mingo village called Pluckystown. 1772 was the year Pluckystown was established. So Pluckystown was established before Harrodstown. Plucky was here before Harrodstown. And so is the Skippy-Kankakee, which was wiped out French, Indian, British War. You see, the American Revolution is part of a greater conflict called the 60 Years' War, which includes the French and British and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, and goes all the way to the War of 1812, which goes to 1814. So 60 years, American Revolution was in the middle of that. You have the Chickamauga Wars, you have all these Indian battles. To ignore the Indian participation in all those wars is to miss a huge part of American history. So it was named after Plucky, right? Mingo Village. The Indian village in the area of Lincoln Avenue and Mingo Park, City, Delaware. That's where it was. Chief Tecanyaterighto. That's Plucky. The Mingo town consisted of about 300 inhabitants. Chippewas, Ottawas, Delaware, Mohawks, Shawnee, Wyandots, and Mingo tribes.